And this is more on the reactions to the Liberals losing this seat, right? So I told you guys to watch this clip of Mark Holland, who's the health minister, the Liberal health minister, who is one of Trudeau's friends, I guess you could say. And he went on TV to defend Trudeau's loss of this 30-year-old district. And the interview is a little bit long, and I'm not actually going to play it because, to be honest, he doesn't really say anything that's even remotely useful or helpful in this interview. Maybe that's my personal opinion, but hey, whatever, right? There's going to be a lot of personal opinions said later on in this episode. But basically, he was kind of trying to brush off these questions on whether or not Trudeau should resign, and he's like, no, Trudeau shouldn't resign. He's doing really well. Look, under Trudeau, we've accomplished so much, and he's done so well. And this by-election, it was just kind of a fluke, and the Conservatives lied, and the Conservatives are trying to fan up support from their supporters and trying to tap into the anger, blah blah blah. Right? That just pretty much sums up his entire point. So I did write a tweet in response to this, but before I share my tweet with the audience, I told you guys to watch this this interview as well. So I'm not sure if you guys had a chance to watch the whole thing, but just what did you take away from this, and how do you react to what Health Minister Mark Holland had just said?
Yeah, so I'll take it away here. So I was watching it this morning for a bit, and I probably got through about 75% of it just because it just seemed a bit ridiculous to me overall. But what it seemed like to me is this health minister from, I think he's from Windsor. I could be mistaken, but that's all what I remember. But he just seemed like him and Trudeau got suspended in school for something, and then he's just trying to defend his buddy Trudeau from all the bad things that he's done. And I think there's a point in the video where he's pretty adamant on supporting Trudeau. He's like, "Oh, I think my vote is still in the Trudeau direction." So obviously, there's a bit of biasness, so to speak. So I think he's not necessarily talking in the position of Canadians. He's just talking in the position of just defending his buddy. And I don't know if that's how you should be doing things, but to me, this whole interview kind of seemed like that. And there were certain instances where it got a bit aggressive. You guys should check out the video, but that's just how I interpret it. It's just protecting his buddy, pretty much. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll link the interview down below in the description for our audience members who are interested in watching the full thing, so that you can make sure we're not just making things up, right? You can watch the interview yourself and react to it yourself. But let me toss it to Tristan first before I share my opinion.
When I was watching it, it just sounded like he was towing the party line. He was just, the party says I should be with Trudeau. Trudeau's our leader. I should just always support Trudeau. Whatever Trudeau says is the best. If I don't support Trudeau, I'll get kicked out. So if I don't think that there is an ounce of real consideration from his own perspective going into it. And I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but from what I can see, and this is just my opinion, I would say that he's just speaking from the party line. He's just going, the party is behind Trudeau. I am behind Trudeau. I cannot deviate from the party line, or else I risk my job and my place, my role, my health minister status. So he doesn't, and I think this is kind of why a lot of these politicians who are cheering for Trudeau and talking about how what a great job he's done and all this, it's very much like they're desperately looking at this glass of water with 3 drops left in it and trying to convince us that it's somehow full, or at least half full. And I just don't think anyone's buying it anymore. So they're really just I just feel like they're really just speaking from the party. I don't think that they're necessarily representing the people who are under them particularly well. And I think that that's something that is just a problem with our political system in general. that politicians are not necessarily very incentivized to represent their the people who voted for them very well, if at all, or the people that they should be representing very well. So I think it's just I don't think that there was anything surprising in what the health minister said. I just I don't think that there was anything really of substance for general consumption. I think it was just the same old the party told me to say Trudeau's good, therefore I'll say Trudeau is good.
So what you're saying is our beloved republic has been taken over by madmen. Yeah, that was a meme that Tristan sent me the other day. It was very true, right? It was like the Roman, like, you know, was it Caesar or whatever, a Roman general, right?
It is a
So,
Roman.
yeah, I mean, I think about the Roman Empire every day, by the way. So it hit me right in the heart of the matter. So anyways, yeah, Dom, you were saying how you watched was it like 75% you said of this interview. So if you did, then you got farther than me, because I could not make it 75% of the way through, right? So okay, here's my tweet, and I'll share it with the audience right now. And you guys can, I'll read aloud what my like first initial reaction after watching this video was. So I said, I tried to watch this whole interview of Health Minister Mark Holland defending Trudeau's loss of a 30-year-old supposedly safe Liberal seat in St. Paul's, Toronto, and I just couldn't finish watching the interview. The way Mark Holland reacted is absolutely disgusting and disrespectful to every single Canadian in this country. You can hear the disdain and malice in Holland's voice as he cannot come to terms with the loss of the St. Paul's seat. He goes on and on bragging about how good of a job that him and Trudeau have done, and is spiteful that Canadians still voted against his party. It strikes me as a tone of, how dare you all vote against the Liberal Party, the greatest political faction on earth. It is not possible for one to be more delusional than Mark Holland. I'm greatly concerned that him, along with other Trudeau ministers, cronies, who all hold the highest offices in this country, so callously put their personal loyalty to Trudeau and the Liberal Party above the interests of the country that they serve. Right. So again, I know the argument is that, you know, all politicians to some extent put their party before the country at different times, right? And I understand that. However, what I am saying is that right now there's a lot of issues in this country, let's just say, right? And the people who are, you know, like a lot of these crises, a lot of these issues are the result of bad policy. And the people who are in charge, who are making these bad policies, are not kind of listening to the people and not learning their lesson, right? So they make one bad policy after another, and instead of making the situation better, they're just making it worse. And then when people push back against them, they're like, "Oh, how could Canadians be so mad, right? I was doing such a great job. I was trying to help them, and they're pushing back against me, right? Like they're trying to like stop me from from achieving the greatest vision and pushing us towards a utopia and, you know, accomplishing like our vision, right? So it's just, yeah, I think like I don't know if Mark Holland really believes the stuff that he's saying, or he's just putting on an act. If he does believe the stuff that he's saying, then he's absolutely delusional. If he does not believe the stuff that he's saying, then that means that he's, you know, actively putting the interests of his own party, of his own job, above the interests of the Canadian people, right? Because that would mean that he knows that these policies that Trudeau have implemented have made the situation worse, and he's still trying to defend Trudeau instead of, you know, pushing back against Trudeau for you know, the good of the whole country, right? So I think, Dom, you put an analogy, like you put this in an analogy perfectly. You're like, you know, if people, like if there's two friends, two high schoolers, they got one of them got suspended, and then the other friend, instead of, you know, saying that, oh yeah, like my friend did a bad thing, he shouldn't have, like, you know, destroyed like the you know, classroom, or like, I don't know, spray painted all over the place and vandalized the school, instead of saying that, he's like, oh yeah, like vandalizing school is good, you know, like he gave the like wall a new fresh coat of paint and it looks much better now because the wall was boring before and now he's like graffitied all over it and now it looks better, right? Like he's trying to find all these like ways, and by doing mental gymnastics trying to find all these ways to say how like, no, you're wrong. Like our prime minister is actually good. If you can't put food on the table, then like it's your fault. And you, how dare you vote against me, right? The prime minister was gonna help you solve this problem, and you just voted against him. So like, boo-hoo. Why? Like that's why you don't have any food, and that's why you can't afford stuff, right? Like, it just kind of, I know that's not exactly what he said, but it just kind of came off like that, right? And it's like they're not, again, they're not listening to the people. They're not listening to, even after this loss, they're not listening to the people. So I think this is going to make the Liberals lose even harder when it's like a national election where every district votes, right? If they can lose St. Paul's, then again, no seat is safe and they could theoretically lose any seat. And it looks like they're going to lose a lot of seats because they're not listening to the voters' problems, right? So let me just kind of toss a question back to you guys and let you guys respond to kind of what I tweeted, or any other things that you want to respond before I move on to the next story.
Yeah, like a final like kind of response off of what you said. Like, I was like, tapping into it. I'll like restate it in a way, I guess. Yeah, he was sounding extremely aggressive, like in how he was speaking. Like, I totally get the part where you're saying like, oh, like you guys are ridiculous. Like, I don't know why you guys are possibly voting this way and thinking this way. And I did get that like enunciation in his tone and like how he was portraying it in the interview. The interview was really aggressive at some certain points, and yeah, it's just total defense of his buddy, and I don't know if that's necessarily the right thing to do, but I do agree with like your tweet and stuff. Like it did, like feel of like what I said and like what you said. Everything is about right. Yeah, like I definitely do not disagree with you in any such way. So yeah.
I would say that it's clear that Mark believes that he is right and that um, that the liberals deserve to win that seat and the conservatives did not deserve to win that seat, and that he can't understand why anyone would vote for the conservatives over the liberals. That's kind of the sense that I got from his tone, and the whole kind of disregarding the concern of like a future like the effects that this kind of signals with how a safe-ish seat for the liberals being lost to the conservatives, like that's kind of a big deal, and he seemed to be kind of blowing that off and being like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, Trudeau's still the greatest thing on the planet, and the liberals are still going to win everything. So it's yeah, I don't know if I like. Andy tends to use some pretty aggressive language when he's referring to these kind of scenarios. I think that I tend to be less aggressive in my my tone towards these politicians, because in my opinion they are all kind of self-interested, and him towing the party line is very much, in my opinion, more so him being self-interested rather than anything else. And I can see the argument for that. Obviously he should be representing the people that are in his riding, etc. But the way our political system is set up, there's no incentive for him to do that. And there's a lot of incentives for him to stick with the party and speak the party line, because obviously, as we can see, he's health minister, which is a higher up role than other roles in and then like a normal MP. So he's clearly got a higher up role, a cabinet role, as a result of him being a good liberal. So I think that it's not that I think that Andy's wrong that the way these party members, the cabinet members, ministers, whatever, MPs, kind of hold the party line, how they should actually be representing the people in their writing, etc. It's more so that I just think that our entire system is broken. So it's kind of like a question of I'm just not surprised by people doing like people just taking advantage of the broken system rather than going out of their way to try and make the broken system actually work as a good system. And I think that that's basically what all of these MPs are doing, is just being a cog in the machine and climbing the party ladder. And there's no real value in being a good representative for your people. So, and again, that's not in the spirit of the politicians and politics in general, but it is basically what is rewarded. So I think it's just a symptom of a larger problem with our political system.
Yeah, I mean, so to be clear, the reason why I use kind of maybe like strong language, as Tristan would put it, to describe many of our politicians and ministers, is that not only do I feel like we're not putting the most competent people in these higher positions, we're actively putting like incompetent people or may I say, maybe people with not the best, like, pure intentions in these positions, right? In these higher ranking positions. So the next kind of article maybe illustrates a little bit more of what I mean, right? So this is an article, before you guys accuse me of like, being an alt-right political like pundit, the next Alex Jones or whatever. This article came from the Globe and Mail. Okay, so I didn't take this off of like Alex Jones Infowars. This is from the Globe and Mail, and it's from the chief Ottawa bureau chief Robert Fife, who I believe is a pretty famous reporter and respected by both sides of the aisle. So this article says that Sajan, who's our defense minister, who is Sikh himself, of the Sikh religion, right? He instructed special forces to rescue Afghan Sikhs during the fall of Kabul. So if you guys remember, when the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan back in 2021, the Taliban moved in and quickly took over, and there was a huge, it was a bit of a mess. It was a very big mess, not a bit of a mess. It was a very big mess, and yeah, basically. People were trying to flee the Taliban as they were kind of coming in and taking over the capital city, Kabul, right? And it would appear that our defense minister kind of instructed our special forces to prioritize rescuing Sikhs above, other people. So there's a huge debate. Again, this is a sensitive topic, and there's a debate online about, whether he diverted resources that would have otherwise been used to save other people and to like save Sikhs specifically, right? But regardless, it's not a good look for Sajan, right? Like, it's like, for those of you who are arguing that, like people are just being racist towards him because he's like of Sikh Indian like ethnicity, right? Like, change this ethnicity, like change this like Sikh headline into any other race, right? So if it was a white defense minister who instructs his special forces to only save white people that are fleeing Kabul, like, how would you think that would look, right? Or take me, right? I'm Asian and I'm of Chinese descent. Say if I was the defense minister and I instructed the Canadian special forces to prioritize saving Canadians of Chinese descent who are trying to flee Kabul, right? I'm not sure if there were any, but let's just say there were, right? How would you feel about that, right? So I think it's important to kind of reframe the question in different like kind of angles to discover whether or not you're carrying a bias or not. And I think that if like again, I don't have all the details, and this is just the story. I literally just read about this earlier today, so I haven't had a lot of time to digest the details of the news. But from what it appears, if the story does shake out the way it's shaking out right now, then it sounds like that there might have been some personal bias, right? Because Sajan is Sikh himself, then maybe he had a special affection for Sikh Canadians and just Sikh people in general. So yeah, I mean, how do you guys like react to this news, right? Like, so from what I can see, like my opinion is that it appears that we have a lot of these like cabinet ministers, right? Like Mark Holland or like Sajan or like all these people who have kind of who have acted in ways that aren't necessarily, for the people or for the good of the country. And they're bringing a lot of these like, personal biases and kind of just, personal ambitions. And it's like kind of bubbling up to the surface, right? Usually this stuff is like hidden in the background. This stuff happens with every cabinet, whether liberal or conservative. I understand that. But the issue with this liberal cabinet in particular is that we're seeing these issues crop up for multiple ministers over and over again. And yeah, I just think that like this is a bit of an issue, right? Like, what do you guys think? Like, am I just being like a alt-right Alex Jones trying to push like an alt-right agenda, or do you think there's some merit to what I'm saying?
Like from my perspective, it does kind of seem like slightly biased. Like I think going on to the point how he's specifically Sikh and then he's trying to rescue Afghan Sikh people. Like you can't deny that those things are pretty similar to each other, and obviously there's like an agenda specifically towards it and a little bit of biasness. Like on the alternative, like maybe could have just said like save like in distress Afghanistan citizens or such matter in Kabul. But yeah, it does say Sikh. But then again, we haven't like necessarily read the whole article. Like from what we were provided here, it's just the tagline that could just be like pure clickbait. Who knows? But yeah, it does definitely look like a bit of biasness. It could have been like reworded a bit differently, like in a less biased manner, or executed overall differently. But yeah, that's how I see it so far.
Right. And again, this is why I kind of emphasize that this is an article from the Globe and Mail, right? Because like you guys wouldn't believe like a word of this headline if like I told you I grabbed it from like an alt-right source, right? Like if I grabbed it from like InfoWars or if I grabbed it from like Breitbart News or whatever, right? Like you guys would say, oh, like they're definitely trying to spin this in some like pro right wing way. But again, this is the Globe and Mail, which I don't think is considered an alt-right publication, right? Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, Tristan, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a little bit sus. It's a little bit suspicious. I don't think that I don't think it would go over well if it was if there was some individuals swapping around the religion, the country, anything. If you just swapped any of that stuff around, I feel like people would get really concerned. Like if you swapped it to like Catholics or something, I feel like there would be a lot of concern or something to that effect. So I think that it's not a particularly good look. It does show a bias being occurring. And again, I haven't looked into this sufficiently to say if that is exactly what he was saying, or if he was suggesting pushing it in that direction for a different reason. If there's, for example, like maybe if Sikhs were more likely to be harassed by the Taliban, that Kabul, this is the Taliban, right? Yeah. When they were taking over. Yeah. So it could be that something to that effect, in which case, I can understand maybe there being more of an emphasis being placed on one group over another, but again, I don't have quite all the details on this, so it does sound like they're at face value. It sounds like there's a bias. Now it's whether or not there is a reason for the bias, because a bias is not necessarily a bad thing. You know, like if we were looking at Germany in the 1940s, and someone was trying to smuggle out a Jewish person, that would be understandable why they may be more priority than like just a random French person, right? Like, so something to that effect, right? Where there is maybe more risk to that individual than to a different individual. So without further information, I can't officially say that I think that what he did was wrong, but I can say that it is suspicious. It's kind of where I'm going.
Yeah, and like my point is not to pick on like Defense Minister Sajan like specifically, right? I'm just trying to make the point that there's been a lot of kind of these gaffes like for multiple ministers, right? Like we talked about Mark Holland for an episode before this episode. Remember, he was the one that made the comments about like the 10-hour road trips burning up the planet and stuff like that, right? So yeah, it seems like we knew of him before this like kind of interview he gave after the St. Paul's election, where he came off as someone who's like a very staunch liberal like ally, right? Like an ally of Trudeau who's kind of willing to defend Trudeau for everything, and willing to take maybe like more extreme positions, I would say, right? And just because like Trudeau's for it, and he's willing to jump in line for everything, right? And then if you remember before that, there was that kind of situation with the Speaker of the House being forced to resign because he brought in a Ukrainian war hero from his writing who turned out to be a Nazi. And not only was he a Nazi, he was a member of the SS, which was like kind of the elite soldiers, like death squad of the Nazi army during World War II. So that was bad enough to force the speaker to resign. So we got a new speaker, and surprise, surprise, like the speaker was a Liberal MP for that as well, right? And yeah, there's just been a lot of these kind of issues with these cabinet ministers. And again, my point was that not only am I like convinced that we're not putting the best, most competent people in these high-ranking, powerful positions, we're actively putting people that are like either completely incompetent or they're competent, but they're using their competence for ulterior reasons that kind of they don't serve the interests of the country the best.